headstand. Again, in the Shivananda lineage, so in like the Shivananda teachings, they'll do Sun A, so you'll run through a couple Sun A's, and then literally the first pose that is taught in a strict Shivananda hatha class is headstand, and then it's followed by shoulder stand. So the counter pose to headstand is shoulder stand, although more recently you'll see the counter pose taught as child's pose. The reason that shoulder stand is probably a superior counter pose is that it then gives the neck, which has been fully engaged. Like when you're in a headstand, ideally, in like a perfect world where you're really strong and you've been practicing for years, your head is actually a few centimeters off the ground. So it then becomes a type of forearm balance, but most of us haven't quite yet reached the strength in the arms to make that happen, so we actually are on the head. In a headstand, there shouldn't be any compression. Like you should feel a little bit of pressure on your head, but it shouldn't be like, oh my God, which is why you push down into the arms to try and get this extension as much as you can, or this length as much as you can. I generally will teach headstand a bit later on in the class, just because of the way that, you know, Americans live their life. They need a lot more neck work than I would assume a traditional yogi would when the flows were put together. I also don't teach headstand in every class. I don't, it takes a lot of work. And a lot of people just aren't strong enough to do it. And to mess up a headstand is to mess up good, in my opinion. Again, up to you, but just understand that there are two places where you can put it, right at the beginning when everybody is still relatively fresh, or having gone through a fairly, you know, I don't want to say gentle, but through a, you know, a focused sequencing that will take you to a place where headstand is achievable and they're not running into muscle fatigue. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So 2 ways to do a headstand. One's called the Bregma headstand and one is called the crown headstand. The Bregma is that little, it was where your fontanelle was when you were a baby. Okay, so it's the seam, and it's actually slightly forward of the crown of the head. The Bregma headstand puts the head back a little bit, which a lot of people actually find more comfortable and more sustainable than a crown headstand. A Bregma headstand will use a lot more muscle to hold up. So it's that kind of muscular effort that gives people a sense of security in the pose. Does that make sense? I'm working, therefore I'm in control of this pose. Whereas a crown headstand is a fairly strict anatomical stack. So a crown headstand is actually right on the crown, and there becomes this great lifting, okay, and this feeling of lightness and suspension through the entirety of the pose, which if somebody is not an experienced yogi can feel slightly frightening. Right? I tend to perform the crown headstand for my practice because I like that light lifting sensation. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and show that to you now. Again, I'm using a wall. It's dangerous to teach headstand up against a wall, so you're at a double-edged sword as a teacher. Okay, if you don't teach against the wall, the fear factor is going to be very, very high, and people aren't going to have as much success getting into the headstand. However, they will learn better how to find and support their body in space. Okay? When they're up against the wall, there is the security blanket, there's the whoopee, but if they are too far away from the wall, again, like in handstand, like in forearm balance, you're going to find that big back bend. They're going to dump into the lower spine, which is not good in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so if you're teaching headstand against the wall, you just need to make sure that you walk around and like get in touch with every person and kind of make sure that that lower back is straight. Verbally, you can cue that by telling them to engage mul band. Okay, if they pull mul band, we know that that little pelvic tilt happens. Also, if they go too close to the wall, you might run into the booty problem, which is like my booty is a little too big to be close to the wall, and that pushes the body forward, which pushes me off of alignment. So there are two ways to get into a headstand. One is slow, focused, and controlled. It has about 4 resting points, or 4 points to stop and say, I'm here, I don't need to go any further. And then there's the pike. Getting in with the pike is a little bit, takes more strength, but it puts you in a better position right out of the gate. Okay? So to get in, and I'll show you the staged movement. Again, it's the bicep grip. Grab the biceps, drop the elbows down, release the hands, interlace the fingers, and make a little basket for yourself. So you'll notice that it's not a straight up and down basket. You actually tip the fingers a bit away from the body so that the kind of flat edge of the front edge of the pinkies is on the ground. Okay, because you don't want the pressure of the pinkies against one another into the earth. You want it to kind of have a little basket, so it's much more space. And then the crown of the head goes onto the floor, and the back side of the crown of the head, so if you drew a circle around the crown of your head, that back edge, which is right near the Bindu chakra, or where the Hare Krishnas wear a ponytail, okay, that's where your pinkies are going to be. And then drop it down. Okay, so you're supported, pushing down into the elbows the same way you would for any other arm balancing pose, and you should find a decent stack between elbows and shoulders. If you dump down into the chest, you don't have any strength. So from here, we tuck toes and lift the knees. This is phase 1. Some people will only get this far. Once they're here, you got to push down into the elbows and slowly walk the feet in. You're going to come to a point where there's a natural lift off. Just your butt is super light. At that point, you suck the legs in and you come into a little tiny squat position. Okay, here's another resting point. And then we push into the arms, straighten the knees out or extend the hips so that the knees are pointing straight to the ceiling. And then we gently unfold. To get out, the feet come down and we drop down. Okay, that's staging into it, which gives everybody an opportunity to stop, evaluate, hang, be there. Piking up into it takes more strength. I prefer piking up into it because it sets the back into position faster. Okay, bicep grip, elbows down, fingers interlaced, tipping the hands, creating a basket, dropping the Hare Krishna knot into the pinkies, crowns to the floor. At this point, you almost feel like you got a Jalandhar bond. Tucking the toes and walking them in. Pushing down so that the muscles along the side of the neck are engaged. And then here we have Mul Band, and we keep the feet flexed. And then point when we arrive. So get down. Feet come down, knees come down, and a lot of teachers will drop into child's pose because you don't want them to bring the head up over the heart too fast. Okay? Again, counter posing for that would be shoulder stand. Okay? Shoulders tucked, lifting the hips, and catching the hips in the hands. So you'll notice that's a nice strong flexion of the neck, which stretches out the muscles that just worked. Also, it leaves the practitioner in a position to drop down and take a break. Okay? After any type of inversion that requires as much strength as headstand does, it's good to drop and let them integrate all those changes. Okay? Contraindications: high blood pressure, risk for stroke, glaucoma, neck injuries, okay, shoulder injuries.